The Lost Bus, a true scary story. A journey into the nowhere between. The last thing I remember before everything went silent was the driver's face in the rearview mirror. His eyes weren't looking at the road. They were looking at something behind us, something that couldn't possibly be there. And then the fog swallowed us whole, and we were somewhere else. Somewhere that wasn't on any map. What you are about to hear is a first-hand account sent to us by someone who wishes to remain anonymous. They've shared this story with very few people, mostly because no one believes them. Those who were there with them, they've scattered to the winds, and most refuse to speak about what happened that night. This is not folklore. This is not an urban legend passed down through generations. This is a documented disappearance that was never properly explained. A bus that vanished for 6 hours on a route that should have taken 40 minutes. Passengers who returned with stories that didn't match the world they left behind. The witness you're about to hear from was one of those passengers. They've carried this experience for years, and they've finally decided to share it. They insist, as we do, that every word of what you're about to hear is true. Listen carefully, and remember, not every road leads home. My name is Marcus. Well, that's not my real name, but it's what I'm going with for this. I'm 38 years old now, but this happened when I was 23. I was working as a data entry clerk for an insurance company. Nothing glamorous, just a regular job that paid the bills. I lived in a small apartment downtown, rode the bus to work every day, same route, same time. I was the definition of ordinary. I need you to understand something before I go any further. I don't believe in ghost stories. I didn't then, and honestly, I'm still trying not to now. I'm a see it to believe it kind of person. I like explanations. I like things that make sense. I've never been one for tall tales or conspiracy theories or anything that can't be proven. But what happened on November 14th, 2009, on the number 47 bus heading south on Millbrook Road? I can't explain it. I've tried for 15 years. And I'm done trying to make it make sense. I'm just going to tell you what happened. It was a Friday night, late autumn, the kind of evening where the sun sets too early and the cold starts creeping into your bones the second you step outside. I remember the sky was this bruised purple color, not quite dark, but getting there fast. There was a thin mist rolling in off the river, nothing unusual for that time of year, just enough to make the streetlights look like fuzzy orange orbs floating in the distance. I'd stayed late at work to finish up some reports. My boss wanted them first thing Monday morning, and I figured I'd rather knock them out on a Friday than ruin my weekend thinking about them. By the time I packed up my desk and grabbed my coat, it was just past 7:30. The office building was nearly empty. My footsteps echoed in the stairwell as I headed down to the lobby. The security guard, Danny, older guy, always reading mystery novels at his desk. He looked up when I walked past. "Working late again, Marcus?" he said. "Just tying up loose ends," I told him. "Have a good weekend, Danny." "You too, kid. Be safe out there." I remember that. Be safe out there. Like he knew something. But that's just my mind playing tricks, adding significance where there wasn't any. He said that to everyone. The bus stop was 2 blocks away. I pulled my jacket tighter as I walked, my breath coming out in little white puffs. The streets were quieter than usual for a Friday night. A few cars passed by, their headlights cutting through the mist. I could hear music thumping from somewhere, probably the bar on 5th Street, but it felt distant, muffled. When I reached the bus stop, there were already 5 other people waiting. I didn't know any of them, but I recognized a couple of faces, the kind of recognition you get from seeing the same people on your commute over and over. There was a woman in her 50s wearing a nurse's uniform, her face tired and drawn. A younger guy, maybe college-aged, with headphones in and his hood pulled up. An elderly man with a cane, wearing a heavy wool coat. A teenage girl texting on one of those old flip phones, the kind with the physical keyboard. And a middle-aged woman in business attire, clutching a leather briefcase. None of us talked. That's the unwritten rule of public transit, right? Keep to yourself. Mind your business. The bus was supposed to arrive at 7:42 p.m. I checked my watch. one of those cheap digital ones with the rubber strap, and it read 7:40. Right on schedule. The mist was getting thicker. I could feel it on my face, cool and damp. The streetlight above us flickered once, twice, then steadied. In the distance, I heard the hydraulic hiss of a bus stopping, the rumble of its engine. A minute later, the number 47 rounded the corner. The bus pulled up to the curb with a wheeze of its brakes, and the doors folded open with that familiar pneumatic sigh. The interior lights were dim, dimmer than usual, I thought at the time, but I didn't think much of it. The city was always cutting budgets. Half the buses had burnt-out bulbs or flickering fluorescents. I stepped on after the nurse and the elderly man, fed my fare card into the reader, and heard the confirming beep. The driver didn't look at me. He was staring straight ahead, both hands on the wheel, even though the bus was still stopped. I caught a glimpse of his face in the rearview mirror, middle-aged, heavy-set, with deep shadows under his eyes. He looked exhausted. But again, city bus driver, night shift? That's par for the course. I moved down the aisle and took a seat about halfway back on the left side. The bus was mostly empty. Besides the 6 of us who'd just boarded, there were maybe 4 or 5 other passengers scattered throughout. An older woman near the front, clutching a shopping bag. 2 men in construction gear near the back, talking in low voices. Someone sleeping against the window a few rows ahead of me. The doors closed with a thunk, and the bus lurted forward. That's when I felt it. That first little tickle of wrongness. The bus was moving, but I couldn't hear the engine properly. It sounded muted, like someone had wrapped the whole vehicle in cotton. The rumble that usually vibrated through your seat, that constant mechanical hum, it was there, but distant, underwater sounding. I looked around. Nobody else seemed to notice. The college kid was bobbing his head to whatever was playing in his headphones. The nurse was staring out the window, her eyes glazed with fatigue. The businessman was reading something on her phone. I told myself I was imagining things. Long week. Tired. Maybe I was coming down with something. The bus rolled forward, merging into traffic. Except there wasn't any traffic. The streets were empty. Completely empty. No cars. No pedestrians. Just wet asphalt reflecting the streetlights and that thick, creeping fog. That wasn't normal. Millbrook Road on a Friday night. There should have been traffic. There should have been people. Students from the university heading to bars. Couples going to dinner. Something. But there was nothing. I pressed my face closer to the window, trying to see better through the mist. The buildings we passed looked right. Same shops, same apartments, same landmarks I'd seen 1,000 times. But they felt wrong. The lights in the windows seemed too dim, too amber. Like old photographs. And there was no movement. No flicker of televisions, no shadows of people moving inside. Just stillness. The bus made its first scheduled stop at the corner of Millbrook and 8th. The brakes hissed. The doors opened. Nobody got on. Nobody got off. We sat there for maybe 10 seconds in complete silence, and then the doors closed again and we continued. I checked my watch, 7:49 p.m. We were running on time. That should have been comforting. It wasn't. At the next stop, same thing. Doors open. Nobody there. The mist swirled in through the open doors, carrying with it a smell I couldn't quite place. Damp earth, maybe. Or wet leaves. Something organic and cold. The college kid pulled out his headphones and looked around, frowning. I guess he'd noticed it too, the wrongness of the empty streets, the silence. He caught my eye for a second, and I saw the confusion on his face. But then he just shrugged and put his headphones back in. We passed the University Avenue intersection. I knew this route by heart. At this point, we should have been starting to climb the hill toward the residential district. But the road ahead just kept stretching out, flat and straight, disappearing into the fog. That's when I realized I didn't recognize where we were anymore. The buildings on either side were wrong. Not different, wrong. They had the right shapes, the right general appearance of the city's architecture, but the details were off. Windows in places there shouldn't be windows. Doors that were the wrong color. Street signs I couldn't quite read, like the letters were shifting when I tried to focus on them. My heart started beating faster. I looked at the other passengers. The teenage girl had stopped texting. She was staring out the window, her phone clutched in her lap, her face pale. The elderly man with the cane was gripping it tighter, his knuckles white. Even the construction workers in the back had gone quiet. Their conversation died off. We all felt it. That collective understanding that something had gone terribly wrong. The nurse stood up and walked toward the front of the bus, holding onto the poles for balance. "Excuse me," she called out to the driver. "Excuse me, sir? I think you might have missed my stop." The driver didn't respond, didn't even glance in the mirror, just kept staring straight ahead, hands at 10 and 2, driving deeper into the fog. "Sir," the nurse's voice had an edge to it now. "Driver? Hello? Nothing." She reached the front and put her hand on the partition. "We need to stop. I need to get off." The driver's head turned, slowly, mechanically, and he looked at her. Not at her face. Through her, like she was made of glass. His mouth opened, and for a second I thought he was going to say something, but no sound came out. Just that hollow opening and closing, like a fish drowning in air. The nurse stumbled backward, her face drained of color. "Jesus Christ," one of the construction workers muttered. And that's when I noticed the smell getting stronger. Not wet leaves anymore. Something else. Something rotten sweet, like meat that's been left out too long. It was coming from outside, seeping in through the vents and the cracks around the windows. The teenage girl started crying quietly. I looked out the window again, and my stomach dropped. The fog was different now. Thicker, yes, but also alive. It wasn't just rolling over the ground. It was moving with purpose, with tendrils that reached out and curled around lampposts and slithered across the pavement. And in the fog, there were shapes. Dark, human-sized shapes that kept pace with the bus, moving alongside us in the periphery. When I tried to look directly at them, they'd vanish. But in my peripheral vision, they were always there. Watching, following. The bus kept moving, but it didn't feel like we were going anywhere. It felt like we were trapped on a treadmill, the same foggy stretch of road repeating endlessly. The shapes in the mist grew bolder. Closer. The college kid ripped off his headphones. "What the fuck is going on?" His voice cracked, high and panicked. Nobody answered him. What could we say? I checked my watch again, 7:51 p.m. Only 2 minutes had passed since the last time I looked. That couldn't be right. It felt like we'd been driving for at least 15, maybe 20 minutes. I held the watch up to my ear. Still ticking, still working, but time felt elastic, stretched thin. The businessman stood up, clutching her briefcase like a shield. "I'm getting off at the next stop," she announced to no one in particular. Her voice was shaking. "I don't care where it is. I'm getting off." "I don't think he's stopping," the elderly man said quietly. He was still gripping his cane, his weathered face set in grim resignation. "I don't think he can stop." "What are you talking about?" the businessman snapped. "Of course he can stop. He's the driver." Hey, driver, pull over." Now, the driver didn't react, didn't even blink, just kept staring through the windshield at the endless road ahead, at the fog that seemed to have swallowed the entire world. One of the construction workers, the bigger one, with a bushy beard and a reflective vest, stood up and started walking toward the front. "All right, enough of this bullshit." He pushed past the nurse and grabbed the driver's shoulder. "I said pull this fucking bus over or I'll." The driver's head swiveled. Not his body, just his head, rotating in a way that made my skin crawl, turning almost completely around to look at the construction worker. And his eyes. God, his eyes. They were black. Not dark brown, not shadowed. Black. Completely black, like someone had scooped out his pupils and irises and filled the sockets with tar. And they were empty. Not in the sense that there was no intelligence there, but empty in a way that suggested there was nothing human left inside. Just a void wearing a driver's uniform. The construction worker let go like he'd been electrocuted and stumbled backward. Jesus Christ. What the hell? The driver's head rotated back forward, smooth and mechanical, like it was on a swivel. He resumed staring at the road. The construction worker practically ran back to his seat, his face the color of old paper. His friend grabbed his arm. What? What did you see? His eyes, man. His fucking eyes. That's not a person. That's not. The bus lurched suddenly, throwing several of us against the seats. I grabbed onto the pole next to me to keep from falling into the aisle. The teenage girl screamed. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered once, twice, 3 times, and when they came back on, they were dimmer, yellower, and the world outside had changed. We were no longer on any street I recognized, not even a distorted version of one. We were on a road, yes, but it cut through absolute nothingness. On either side of the pavement was just void. Not darkness, not fog, void. An absence so complete that looking at it made my eyes hurt, made my brain rebel against what it was seeing. And in that void, there were things. I saw them now, clearly, without the obscuring mist. They stood at the edge of the nothingness, perfectly still, watching the bus pass. They were shaped like people. 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, but the proportions were wrong. Too tall, too thin. Their limbs bent at angles that didn't match any skeleton I'd ever seen. Their heads were smooth, featureless, like mannequin heads before the faces are painted on. There were dozens of them. Hundreds, maybe. Standing in neat rows, perfectly spaced, all facing the bus. All perfectly motionless except for their heads, which turned slowly to follow our movement, tracking us like cameras. "Do you see them?" the nurse whispered. Her voice was hoarse, barely audible. "Please tell me you see them too." "I see them," I managed to choke out. My throat felt like sandpaper. The teenage girl was full-on sobbing now, her hands pressed against the window, tears streaming down her face. "I want to go home. Please, I just want to go home." The woman who'd been sleeping near the front, I'd almost forgotten about her, suddenly sat up straight. She turned to look at all of us, and I felt my blood turn to ice. Her eyes were black too, just like the driver's. Empty, bottomless pits. She smiled. Not a warm smile. Not a reassuring smile. A smile that was all teeth and wrongness, too wide for her face, stretching her lips until they split at the corners. And then she spoke, but her mouth didn't move. The words came from somewhere else, somewhere deeper. "You're all exactly where you need to be." The nurse screamed. The businessman bolted for the back emergency exit, dropping her briefcase in her panic. She grabbed the handle and yanked. Nothing. It didn't budge. She yanked again, harder, throwing her full weight against it. "It's locked. It won't open." "Why won't it open?" The college kid joined her, both of them pulling at the emergency door, at the windows, at anything that might offer an escape. But nothing moved. The bus had become a sealed container, and we were trapped inside with 2 things that used to be people. The woman with the black eyes stood up. So did the driver, the bus still moving forward on its own, with no hands on the wheel. They both turned to face us, standing at either end of the aisle, their movements synchronized, mechanical. "Sit down," the woman said, her voice coming from everywhere and nowhere. "The journey isn't finished." "Fuck you," one of the construction workers shouted, but his voice was shaking. "Let us off this bus. Sit down." And then, I don't know how to explain this, then we did. Not because we wanted to. Not because we decided to. We just did. My legs stopped obeying me and folded into the seat. Everyone else too. Like puppets whose strings had been pulled. The businessman, halfway to the emergency exit, slid into the nearest seat. The construction workers, standing in the aisle, dropped into their seats like they'd been shoved. Only the elderly man seemed to resist. He stayed standing, gripping his cane, his jaw clenched tight. For a moment, I thought he might be strong enough, might have some kind of protection the rest of us didn't. But then his knees buckled, and he sat down too. The woman with black eyes smiled again. Good. She and the driver returned to their positions, her sitting by the window, him behind the wheel, and the bus continued its journey through the void. I tried to move, tried to lift my hand, turn my head, anything. But I was frozen, paralyzed. I could breathe, I could blink, I could move my eyes, but that was it. The rest of my body was locked in place. Around me, I could hear the others breathing, quick, panicked breaths. The teenage girl was still crying, tears running down her face, but she couldn't even lift her hands to wipe them away. And still, we drove deeper into the nothing. Time stopped meaning anything. My watch kept ticking. I could see it on my wrist, the seconds flipping by, but I had no sense of how long we'd been frozen in our seats. Minutes? Hours? It could have been either. It could have been both. The figures outside continued to watch us. More of them appeared the further we went, until they lined both sides of the road in endless rows, stretching back into infinity. They never moved except to turn their featureless heads, tracking our progress. And then the bus started to slow down. I felt it in my stomach, that deceleration. The engine sound changed pitch, winding down. The endless road ahead began to narrow, the void pressing in closer on both sides. We rolled to a stop. The sudden silence was deafening. No engine hum, no road noise, just our ragged breathing and the teenage girl's quiet sobs. The driver stood up. The woman with black eyes stood up. They turned to face us again, and this time, they spoke in unison, their voices overlapping in perfect, horrible harmony. "It's time to pay the fare." The teenage girl managed to force out words through her paralysis, her voice barely a whisper. "We already paid. We paid when we got on." The things wearing human skin tilted their heads in unison, like curious birds. "Not that fair." The emergency lights along the floor started blinking, red, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. And with each blink, something changed. The interior of the bus began to shift. The walls seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting. The seats felt softer, almost organic. I could feel mine pulsing beneath me, warm and alive. The driver walked down the aisle, slow and deliberate. His movements were still wrong, still too stiff, but there was purpose in them now. He stopped next to the elderly man. "You first," the driver said. "You've been waiting the longest." The elderly man's eyes went wide. No, I'm not ready. I'm not. Everyone's ready when we say they are." The driver reached down and touched the old man's shoulder. Just a simple touch, fingers resting lightly on the fabric of his coat. The old man's mouth opened in a silent scream. His body went rigid, every muscle locking up, and then he started to fade. Not quickly, slowly, like someone was turning down his opacity, making him transparent. I could see through him, see the seat behind him. His outline remained, but everything inside was dissolving, becoming translucent, becoming nothing. And the whole time, he was screaming without sound, his mouth stretched wide in terror and agony. Within 30 seconds, he was gone, completely gone. The seat where he'd been sitting was empty. His cane clattered to the floor. The teenage girl started screaming then, really screaming, a sound of pure animal panic. The construction workers were shouting, cursing, begging. The nurse was praying in rapid Spanish, words tumbling over each other. I couldn't make a sound. My voice was locked in my throat, trapped behind the paralysis. The woman with black eyes stood up and walked toward the businessman. "You next. You've been running from this for 3 years." "No." The businessman found her voice, broke through whatever was holding her. "No, you can't. I changed. I got better. I stopped. Debts must be paid. You know this. Please." The businessman was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks in black rivers. "Please, I have a daughter. She's only 6. She needs me. Please." The woman touched her forehead. The businessman's scream was cut short. Her eyes rolled back, showing only whites, and she began to fade just like the elderly man. But slower, so much slower, like they wanted her to feel every second of it. I watched her disappear, piece by piece, and I couldn't look away, couldn't close my eyes, could only witness. When she was gone, The woman turned to look at the rest of us. Some of you will go tonight. Some of you will see again. The bus always comes back around. The driver was already moving toward the construction workers. No, man, no. The bearded one finally broke free of his paralysis, lurching out of his seat. He grabbed his friend's arm. Come on, we have to. The driver moved faster than anything that size should be able to move. 1 second he was 3 rows away. The next he was right there, his hand clamped around the bearded worker's throat. You don't run from the bus, the driver said. His voice had changed, deepened, becoming something that resonated in my chest like a bass note. No one runs from the bus. The bearded construction worker's feet left the ground. The driver lifted him with one hand, effortless, like he weighed nothing. The worker clawed at the driver's arm, his face turning purple, veins bulging in his forehead. Please, his friend begged. Please, take me instead. He's got kids. He's got. Noble, the woman with black eyes said, appearing beside the friend. But it doesn't work that way. Each fare is specific. Each debt is personal. The bearded worker's struggles were weakening. His arms dropped to his sides. And then the driver did something that I'll never forget, that I still see when I close my eyes at night. He opened his mouth, wider than any human mouth should open, the jaw unhinging like a snake's, and breathed in. The construction worker's body convulsed. Something was leaving him, something visible like steam or smoke, pale and writhing. It streamed out of his mouth, his nose, his eyes, pulled into the driver's impossibly wide maw. The worker's skin began to gray, to shrivel, like a piece of fruit drying out in fast forward. When the driver finally dropped him, what hit the floor wasn't a person anymore. It was a husk, a dried out, mummified thing that barely looked human. The eyes were sunken pits. The skin was stretched tight over bones. The mouth was frozen open in a final, eternal scream. The other construction worker vomited. The sound of it, wet and violent, echoed through the bus. 3 down, the woman said, almost cheerfully. The bus is lighter now. Better gas mileage. She laughed. The driver laughed. The same laugh, perfectly synchronized, echoing off the breathing walls. The college kid was next. He didn't even fight. Just sat there, tears streaming down his face, whispering, "Mom, I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry," over and over again. The woman knelt beside him, almost gentle. "Shhhh. It'll be over soon. You won't remember the pain." "Will I remember anything?" he asked, his voice small, childlike. "No." She placed both hands on either side of his head, and he began to fade. Unlike the others, he went quietly, peacefully almost, his whispered apologies growing softer and softer until there was nothing left but silence and an empty seat. Forgone. I looked around at who remained. The nurse, the teenage girl, the other construction worker, the woman who'd been sleeping with the black eyes. But she didn't count, did she? She was one of them. And me. 5 of us got on at my stop. For still remained. My mind was racing, trying to understand the pattern, trying to find the logic. The elderly man, natural causes? Close to death anyway? The businessman, she'd said something about running for 3 years. From what? From this? The bearded construction worker, the driver said something about debts. The college kid, I couldn't find the pattern, couldn't make sense of it. The nurse was rocking back and forth in her seat, still praying. The teenager had gone silent, catatonic, staring at nothing. The surviving construction worker was curled in a fetal position, his friend's desiccated corpse crumpled in the aisle a few feet away. The driver and the woman conferred in the front of the bus, their heads close together, speaking in a language that hurt to hear. It sounded like grinding metal and breaking glass, like the death rattle of some massive animal. Then they turned back to us. "The rest of you," the driver said, "are not for tonight." The relief that flooded through me was so intense I thought I might pass out. "Not me. Not tonight. But you will remember," the woman added. "You will carry this with you. You will know that the bus is always running, always making its rounds. And one day, When your fare comes due, we'll be there to collect." The teenage girl let out a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "You may think you'll warn others," the driver continued. "You may think you'll tell your story, convince people to avoid the number 47, to never ride at night, to stay away from Millbrook Road. But no one will believe you," the woman finished. "They never do." The driver returned to his seat. The woman sat back down by her window. The emergency lights stopped blinking. The walls stopped breathing. The seats returned to normal plastic and foam. And the bus started moving again. We drove in silence. None of us spoke. None of us moved. We just sat there, surrounded by the void, the featureless figures still watching from their eternal vigil. I don't know how long we drove. My watch had stopped working. The display was frozen at 7:51 p.m. But gradually, slowly, the void began to recede. The fog returned. And through the fog, I started to see familiar shapes. Buildings. Real buildings. The coffee shop on the corner of Millbrook and 9th. The 24-hour laundromat. The pawn shop with the flickering neon sign. We were back. The bus made a stop. The doors opened with their familiar pneumatic hiss. The teenage girl stood up. We all could move again and stumbled toward the exit. She looked back at us once, her young face aged by what she'd seen, and then she was gone, disappearing into the normal, real, blessedly mundane world outside. The next stop, the construction worker got off. He didn't look at his friend's body. Couldn't. Just walked past it like it wasn't there, like if he acknowledged it, he'd have to accept that it was real. The nurse got off at the following stop. Before she left, she turned to me. "Pray," she said. "I don't know if it'll help, but pray anyway." Then it was just me. The bus continued its route. Through downtown, past the university, into my neighborhood. Everything was normal now. There were cars on the road, pedestrians on the sidewalks, lights in windows. The world had returned, or we had returned to it. The bus stopped at my usual stop, the one 3 blocks from my apartment. I stood up on shaking legs, walked toward the front. The driver was back to looking human, middle-aged, heavy-set, tired eyes. But I knew what was underneath. I'd seen it. As I passed him, he spoke. His voice was normal now, gravelly and worn from years of cigarettes. "Have a good night." I looked at him, really looked at him. "Will I see you again?" His mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. "Everyone sees me again. Eventually." I got off the bus. The doors closed behind me. The bus pulled away, its taillights disappearing into the night traffic. I stood there on the sidewalk, watching it go, my whole body trembling. I checked my watch. The display was working again. It read 1:47 a.m. 6 hours. We'd been gone for 6 hours. I walked home in a daze, let myself into my apartment, locked the door, locked the deadbolt, put the chain on, went to the bathroom and threw up until there was nothing left. Then I sat on my bathroom floor, my back against the tub, and I cried. I called in sick to work on Monday. Tuesday too. I told them I had the flu. On Wednesday, my boss called and said if I didn't come in, I'd be fired. So I went in, sat at my desk, stared at my computer screen, tried to pretend everything was normal. At lunch, I searched the news, searched online forums, searched anywhere I could think of for reports of a missing bus, missing passengers, anything. Nothing. No reports of a bus disappearing. No missing persons matching the descriptions of the people who'd been taken. It was like it never happened. Like we'd slipped through a crack in reality and no one had noticed. I tried to find the others, the ones who'd survived. I walked the bus routes at different times, hoping to see the teenage girl or the nurse or the construction worker. But I never did. They'd vanished into the city, probably doing exactly what I was doing, trying to forget, trying to move on, trying to convince themselves it was a shared hallucination or a gas leak or anything other than what it actually was. A week later, I saw a bus driver at a different stop. Not my route, not the number 47, but I asked him anyway. "Do you know a driver who works the 47 line? Night shift? Heavy-set guy, middle-aged?" The driver looked at me funny. The 47 doesn't run at night, buddy. Stops at 7 p.m. Budget cuts last year. That's not possible. I wrote it. At night. Just last week. He shrugged. Maybe you're thinking of a different route. The 47's been day only for almost 2 years now. I showed him my bus card, showed him the transaction from that night. The timestamp, 7:42 p.m., November 14th, Route 47. He stared at it for a long moment. That's a glitch in the system. Has to be. Does it? He didn't answer. Just got back on his bus and closed the doors. I moved 6 months later. Different neighborhood, different bus routes. I told myself it was for work, a shorter commute. But really, I just couldn't walk past that bus stop anymore. Couldn't see that corner without feeling my chest tighten, without smelling that rotten sweet smell. For years, I convinced myself I'd never ride a bus again. I walked everywhere, took taxis when I had to, eventually bought a car I could barely afford. Anything to avoid public transportation. But you can't avoid it forever. Not in a city. Not really. 3 years ago, I was running late for a job interview. My car wouldn't start. The taxi apps were all showing 45-minute waits. And there, at the corner, was a bus stop. I stood there for 5 minutes, arguing with myself. It was daytime. It was a different route. It had been years. Whatever had happened, it was a one-time thing. A fluke. An anomaly. I got on the bus. It was fine. Normal. The driver was a young woman who smiled when I paid my fare. The passengers were reading newspapers, listening to music, talking on their phones. Everything was perfectly, wonderfully mundane. I started taking the bus again after that. Cautiously at first, then more regularly. I told myself I'd beaten it. Overcome my trauma. Moved on. But I never take the bus at night. And I never, ever take Route 47. The thing about trauma, about real, deep in your bones trauma, is that it doesn't just go away because you want it to. It lives inside you, waits for quiet moments, strikes when you least expect it. I started having the dreams about 2 months after it happened. Always the same dream. I'm back on the bus, sitting in that same seat halfway down on the left. The fog presses against the windows. The figures stand in their endless rows, watching. And I can't move, can't scream, can't do anything but wait for the driver to stand up, turn around, and walk down the aisle toward me. He stops right next to me, leans down. His breath smells like copper and spoiled meat. "Your fare is almost due," he whispers. Then I wake up, drenched in sweat, my heart hammering so hard I think it might burst through my ribs. The dreams came every night for the first year. Then they tapered off to once a week, once a month. Now they only come a few times a year, but they're just as vivid, just as terrifying as they were in the beginning. I tried therapy, sat across from a kind-faced woman in a comfortable office and tried to explain what happened. I made it through about half the story before I saw the look in her eyes, that careful, professional concern that really meant she thought I was delusional. "It sounds like you experienced a severe dissociative episode," she said gently, "possibly triggered by stress or exhaustion. The brain can create incredibly detailed false memories when..." I never went back. I tried talking to my girlfriend at the time. We'd been together for 8 months. I thought maybe if I shared this with her, if someone I loved knew the truth, it would lose some of its power over me. I told her everything. She listened quietly, holding my hand, her face serious and attentive. When I finished, she said, "Baby, I think you should see someone. A professional. This sounds like it's really affecting your quality of life." We broke up 3 months later. Not because of the story, at least, not directly, but because I could see it in her eyes every time I hesitated before getting on a bus, every time I checked the route number twice, every time I insisted we take a cab instead. She thought I was broken. Maybe I am. The physical reminders don't help. I still have the watch I was wearing that night. I've tried to throw it away a dozen times, but I can't. It's evidence. Proof that I'm not crazy. The timestamp is still there in its memory. November 14th, 2009, 7:42 p.m. to 1:47 a.m. 6 hours on a bus route that should take 40 minutes. Sometimes I take it out of the drawer where I keep it, stare at it, wonder if those 6 hours actually happened, or if we went somewhere else entirely, someplace where time moves differently. I have scars too, not physical ones, at least not ones anyone else can see. But I have them. I can't stand silence anymore. I always have music playing, or the TV on, or a podcast in my headphones. Because in silence, I hear things. The hydraulic hiss of bus doors. The grinding metal voice of those things pretending to be human. The wet, violent sound of the construction worker's body hitting the floor. I can't look at fog the same way. When it rolls in off the river, thick and gray, I stay inside. Lock my doors. Close my curtains. Wait for it to pass. And I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched. It's not constant. Not every day. But sometimes, when I'm walking down the street or sitting in a cafe or lying in bed at night, I feel it. That prickle on the back of my neck. That certainty that something is observing me, studying me, waiting. I'll turn around quickly, trying to catch whatever it is in the act. There's never anything there. But sometimes, not often, but sometimes, I'll see a bus in my peripheral vision. Just for a second. A bus that shouldn't be on that street, running a route that doesn't exist. And when I turn to look directly at it, it's gone. Or I'll see someone standing on a corner, perfectly still, their face in shadow. And for just a moment, I think I see that same inhuman proportions, those two long limbs, that featureless head. Then they move, and they're just a normal person waiting for a light to change or checking their phone. And I'm left wondering if I'm losing my mind after all. About 5 years after it happened, I tried to find the others. The survivors. I started with the teenage girl. I didn't know her name, but I remembered details. The flip phone with the keyboard. The backpack with band patches sewn onto it. She'd been texting when we got on the bus. I posted on local forums, social media groups, anywhere I could think of, looking for someone who rode the Route 47 bus on the night of November 14th, 2009. Female, late teens, please contact me. Nothing for weeks. Then I got a message. No name, just a burner email address. Stop looking. It doesn't help. It only makes them notice you more. I wrote back immediately. Was it you? Were you there? Please, I just need to know I'm not crazy. The response came 3 days later. You're not crazy, but you need to let it go. Every time you talk about it, every time you remember it too clearly, you draw their attention. The bus has routes. Some routes take years. Some take decades. But it always comes back around. Don't make it come back faster. I tried to reply again, asking questions, begging for more information. But the email address was already deactivated. I found the nurse next, or rather, I think I did. There was an obituary in the paper about a year after the incident. A nurse at Mercy General died in her sleep at age 54. No cause of death listed. The photo showed a woman with tired eyes and a kind smile. It looked like her, but I couldn't be sure. The construction worker, the one who survived, I never found. I checked accident reports, obituaries, anything that might give me a clue. Nothing. Either he's still out there, living his life, trying to forget, or his fare came due. I'm 38 now. 15 years have passed since that November night. I have a different job, a different apartment, a different life. On the surface, I'm fine. Functional. I pay my bills. I have friends. I date occasionally. I'm a normal person living a normal life. But I'm always listening for it. The sound of a bus engine. The hiss of pneumatic brakes. The particular quality of fluorescent lights humming in an enclosed space. Every November 14th, I don't leave my apartment. I call in sick, stock up on food, make sure all my doors and windows are locked. I tell myself it's just a precaution, that nothing's going to happen. But I still hear it sometimes, late at night. The sound of an engine idling outside my window. I don't look. I learned that lesson. Looking only makes it worse. The sound always goes away eventually. But it comes back. Always comes back. Last month, something happened that made me decide to finally tell this story publicly. I was at a bar with some coworkers. Nothing fancy, just a neighborhood place near the office. We were celebrating someone's promotion, having a few drinks, decompressing after a long week. A woman sat down next to me at the bar. Early 30s, professional attire, looked like she'd just gotten off work. She ordered a whiskey, neat. We made small talk. The weather, the game on TV, how crowded the bar was. Then she said, "You take the bus to work?" I froze. "What? I just noticed you have a bus pass sticking out of your wallet." "I take the bus too." "Which route?" The 12, I said carefully. She nodded. "Good route. Reliable. I used to take the 47 years ago, but they shut that one down." My heart started pounding. "Did they?" "Yeah. Well, the night service anyway. During the day, it's fine. But at night." She took a sip of her whiskey. "At night, buses can take you places you don't want to go." I couldn't breathe. "What do you mean?" She turned to look at me fully, and her eyes were normal, brown, human, but there was something in them. Recognition. "I mean that some routes don't follow the map," she said quietly. "Some routes go through other places. And if you're unlucky enough to get on at the wrong time, you might end up somewhere that's not in any guidebook." "You were there," I whispered. "You were on the bus. That night." I don't know what you're talking about," she said loudly, cutting me off. Then, quieter, leaning in close. "And neither do you. For your own sake, you don't know anything about any bus or any night. Understand? But they're always listening," she hissed. "Always watching. The more you talk about it, the more you remember it, the more you make yourself visible. Is that what you want? To be visible to them?" "No, but..." "Then forget it happened. Forget this conversation. Forget you ever rode a bus that night. Forget everything." She finished her whiskey in one swallow, put money on the bar, and left. I never saw her again. But that conversation, that warning, it's why I'm telling this story now. Because I can't forget. I've tried for 15 years, and I can't. It's burned into my memory, carved into my soul. And if I'm going to carry this weight, if I'm going to live with this knowledge that there are things out there in the dark, things that wear human faces and drive routes through reality's cracks, then maybe someone else needs to know too. Maybe you need to know. I don't know what the bus is. A test? A punishment? A toll collector for debts we don't remember owing? I don't have answers. Just the memory of 6 hours that shouldn't have existed, and the knowledge that somewhere out there, the bus is still running. The number 47 still makes its rounds, even if the official schedules say otherwise. It picks up passengers at stops that aren't on any map, takes them on routes through places that don't have names. Some of those passengers make it back, some don't. I still ride the bus sometimes. Not often, and never at night, but sometimes. Because I refuse to let fear completely control my life. I refuse to give those things, whatever they are, that much power over me. But I'm careful, always careful. I check the route number twice, 3 times. I make sure the driver looks human, really human, before I get on. I watch the other passengers for signs of wrongness. I keep track of the stops, the streets, the landmarks. And I never, ever close my eyes during the ride. Because the woman in the bar was right about one thing. They're always listening, always watching. And the bus never really stops running. It's out there right now, somewhere, picking up another group of unsuspecting passengers, driving them through the fog, into the void, to that place between places where time stops meaning anything and the figures watch from their eternal vigil. Some of those passengers will make it back, carrying their trauma like a weight they can never put down. Some will disappear, their fares collected, their debts paid. And the bus will keep running. It always does.